fine. So noting that it's 7:01 p.m. on November 15th, 2023, I'll call the Board of Health meeting to order. And we have, about that, we don't have any scheduled hearings, number of items of business, and something to consider for adding to the agenda. But before we do that, we can go around with a roll call to indicate who's here tonight from the board. So Daryl Beardsley present.
Matt Beavers present.
Julie Dreyfus present.
Diana Hook present.
Rebecca Honeywell present.
Okay, and Matt, if you'd like to take it away beginning now, or
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right. So as
Thank
noted,
you.
we have nothing on the agenda. We'll probably wait on agents business since Mark isn't here. But we can probably just, I guess, start moving through. I guess first we need to vote to amend the agenda. Did we do that? We didn't do that.
No, not yet.
So we have one item to add, which is a temporary food permit for the 19th, which would be prior to our next meeting. So we need to address it before then. So do I have a motion to add the temporary food permit for Nirvana Tea House and Cafe to the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. So I guess why don't we just, if it's reasonable, we'll just start moving through the chair's business in order. Ellen, do you have the update from Tom on the Heritage?
Yes, he told me that all violations have now been corrected. All violations to date have now been corrected. That was his main thing. But then he said at the last meeting, you had asked for the number of re-inspections he had conducted there this year. And he said there were 5.
Okay. And so was that, I remember I feel like I got an email from him. 5 would have been not that much. I mean, normally you would expect 3 in the course of a year. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So it was.
Or normally we would expect 2, but he
okay.
did say he viewed
extra.
this as a high, I'm forgetting the terminology he used.
Yeah.
High.
High risk.
I think I
Thank
said,
you.
yeah, high risk.
And therefore he would suggest 3, so that I believe leaves us with 2 re-inspections that were beyond covering just the checkup, the follow-up of the first inspection. Right? So normally the food inspector goes out, does 1 inspection, and if there are any issues, a follow-on. And we've always treated that under the umbrella of the fee for the required inspections. So if we treat the 3, then we have 2 that would fall into the category of the additional inspection fee.
So I think as merely symbolic as it is, I think we should levy the $150 for the 2 extra inspections if others agree.
I agree. It doesn't come close to covering the costs on the amount of time that he spent. That is much higher than for other establishments.
I agree too, Matt.
I do too. I think it'll help incentivize results for inspections next year.
Hopefully. All right, so do I have a motion to levy a $150 fee for the Heritage to cover the cost of the 2 additional inspections above and beyond those expected?
So moved.
So moved. Seconded.
Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Right. I think the one other point I might add there is that not for tonight, but for at some point, we should maybe discuss revising our fee schedule, particularly for those.
Okay, and that's something that there's some potential to do that through the SAFE program, which we think talked about at the meeting you weren't able to attend. So not sure where that's going to go just yet, but.
Okay. All right, so our next item is Laurel Farm well update.
I'd rather wait for Mark because
Mark,
he
okay.
has the latest and greatest information from them.
And I have joined. I'm sorry,
Oh,
I'm having trouble
okay.
with my Surface, so not a good time with my computer. It was working all day today. I don't know what happened. But
Are you ready?
anyways,
Do
I'm here.
you want to comment on Laurel Farm, Mark, or do you want a moment to get settled and we'll come back?
No, I can comment. I have been in touch with the one of the well companies, Geosphere, Ray. I think it's Talkington, I think is his name, and he updated me because I went by there. I think it was last Thursday or this Monday, and he basically reported back to me. I asked for an update that the 2 wells have been drilled. We did receive the well drill forms. That's a state form telling us what the rates were, and they were not the best. They were like 2 or 3 gallons per minute, and they have wells anywhere from 500 to 600 feet. And with that, they indicated they're not ready yet to do the well pump test per our requirements. They are working with the town to determine the next steps. And that's pretty much it at this time. So it's in limbo, and we'll have to wait for a decision from whoever is responsible for it within the town.
Can I give a little more information too?
Sure.
At a department head meeting today, oh, I can't remember his name, but the head of the recreation department, he reported on this, and he said, I think Jeremy asked him, what if he knew what they were planning to do, and he said he has no idea yet. He's waiting. He'll bring it, and it will be discussed at the next recreation committee meeting, which is sometime next week, I believe. So until then, until the entire recreation committee discusses it, there's no decision on what to do.
All right, that's relatively disappointing yield. It seems as though it probably won't support what their plans were, so it'll be interesting to see what they decide.
Right. I think the good news is that there are other ways to approach it as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Any other updates on? It sounds like we just are going to wait for the recreation committee, and so nothing else pending on that. I think we were waiting on an irrigation plan once they decide how to move forward, but we'll see what the committee decides. So next we have board comments to ZBA on Greenwood Homes, and trying to recall who was working. Was this Julie? Were you working on this? Julie and Daryl?
Gerald, that's the one that we submitted. Is that right? No,
We have
you and
not-
I did. That was Course Brook.
Okay.
No, sorry.
No, we have not submitted new comments, although I would like to hear if Mark has had a chance to review the plans, just to go over some of that as far as you've gotten, Mark.
Yes, I've started the plan review. I was confirming the soil testing with my soil test logs, and there are needs to sit down with the engineer to make sure their logs are accurate. It doesn't meet what I show on not all of them, but some of them. And then while I was doing the review, I started of the soil test logs. I was taking a cursory look at the plans and found some other questions I have for the engineer. One being that because it's a comprehensive permit, they will follow strictly Title V for the septic, but there's, I guess, a request to waive the well regulations that are local control. So with that said, they'll have to note something on the plan or request a waiver because right now it doesn't, some of the wells are located where it doesn't meet our local regulations, which they need to meet because the state only has one regulation, that's to test for bacteria. The state has guidelines, as I'm sure you're all aware of, but they don't have regulations. When there are no regulations in place, then the local regulations prevail. And they're not following the local regulations from what I can see on well distances for some of the lots. And that's pretty much it at this point.
Okay, and our usual procedure, well, our main usual procedure is not to grant variances on new construction. But the other usual procedure is that when an applicant seeks a waiver, we really need to hear the reasoning and why the waiver is needed and being requested. But we may be doing that at the ZBA meetings.
Okay. So I guess functionally is the next step for Mark to get some clarification from the engineer, or to sort of wait and discuss the ZBA meeting?
Yes, I'll be working with the engineer on the soil test logs to find out, and I'll ask him the question too about the well regulations. After that discussion, I send out a written notice to the applicant on the deficiencies, and then we'll go from there. And as Darrell noted, most of this will probably come under the zoning board, so I'm not sure how that will. I guess what'll happen is we send our letter of deficiencies, not just to the applicant, but to the zoning board. Is that correct, Darrell?
Yes, so the next zoning board hearing that will include Farm Road and or Greenwood, I believe it's both, is Thursday, December 14th at 7 p.m. And those meetings have been via Zoom. So we will have another meeting on December 6th before that meeting. And if you've been able to gather more information, Mark, then that would be helpful.
Yes, I do
By
plan
that
on having,
time.
yeah, I hope to have them reviewed and finalized this week so that there'll be plenty of time for response from the applicant's engineer, as well as being able to communicate the deficiencies to the zoning board, as well as the Board of Health.
So we should plan to have this on our agenda again for the next meeting, then to get updates from Mark.
I
Yes.
agree.
All right. Any other discussion on that topic?
Not at the moment.
All right, so next we have the fiscal year 25 budget. Number of things to pull up. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review this. I think the main point here is that, as they do every year, advisory committee is asking that our budget remain flat, and has budgeted for a cost of living adjustment of 3.5%. And that's sort of the main gist of this edition of this letter here, as well as sort of laying out the timeline with our budgets due by December 8th. And so that would also be after the next meeting, but it probably makes sense to review things here if we can. Does anyone else want to look at any other details on the guidance letter, or should I just pull up the budget?
No, I think the budget.
Can I ask a question that
Oh, sure.
the burial agent is under Board of Health? I did not know that.
You're healthy till you're not.
And then it's too late.
I've always missed that, I guess.
Yeah, it's always been in there, but it's always been the town clerk. Well, it hasn't always been, but for the most part, it's the town clerk.
Is there any information that's fed back to the Board of Health from the burial agent, or it's a pretty straightforward?
No, it's pretty straightforward. When the funeral director will request, he has to provide the death certificate to the town clerk, and then she just signs and provides something. I don't know exactly what it is. I've done it a couple of times, but many years ago.
Yeah,
we don't-
they will issue a burial permit, and
Right.
the clerk, it's always handled with the clerk. So with that being the situation, it's best to have the clerk as the burial agent as well.
I wonder if at some point we're going to need to discuss under this topic of burial issues, and maybe to be added to a future agenda, for regulatory updates. So Mass DEP now has guidance about green burials that might be done on property. So, and that might fall under us. Literally.
Yeah.
So,
Just trying to imagine how one calculates the well setback.
Oh God.
I'm sure someone has done it. So otherwise in the budget, my question was, what is Board of Health longevity?
Well, that's new this year.
That's why I don't know what it is.
Yeah, the town adopted that, I guess, last year at town meeting, and I guess I'm the only one on the Board of Health that gets it.
Congratulations.
oh.
Congrats.
So I think I got $650 extra in a paycheck last September, and you get the second half in March.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Yeah.
That more than makes up for the lack of all of the hold to merely a cost of living increase, as opposed to how about progressive pay rate changes. But,
Yeah, so there's only a few in town hall that get it. I can't remember the number of years you have to. It's a sliding scale. You get less if you've been there maybe 10 years or 50, I don't know. But I've been there the maximum, so this is it.
Well, good. I'm glad. That feels like a worthwhile
Yes.
use of the budget. Wish it was
Yeah.
more. But
Yes.
we're definitely approving
Yes.
that line item.
And then other items, it looks like for the most part, salaries are sort of within the range that's expected for sort of guidance received from advisory.
Yeah, and the salaries, that's completed by the town accountant. So
Okay.
she provides the document all completed, so there's no question that I'm fudging with it or anything.
We trust you. And then why have we highlighted animal and nursing here? Is there a reason for that?
I highlighted those two because they are not level funded. And
Okay.
advisory is requesting level funding. And so the animal inspector in the past has always been treated as an employee.
Got
So
it.
she's given the 3.5%, but it's 3.5% on her base salary. $480 is added to her salary for rabies testing if needed. And if it's not needed, it goes back to the general fund. So the base salary, when it's increased 3.5%, and then you add the 480 to that 5,500, and it becomes a 3.19% increase. And then the nursing contracts, we have a contract with the VNA, and they get a 1% increase each year for 3 years. So I can't level fund that. But the guidance received today at the department head meeting is if you can't level fund something, they would like you to cut something else in the expense lines so that it does work out to be no increase. So you can discuss what you want to cut.
Ugh.
I don't think-
The equipment line at the bottom, it's I don't know why they haven't changed the name of it. That's the Sharps
Yeah.
disposal
Mhm.
kiosks maintenance. So it's not new equipment, and that's the cost for the maintenance and the disposal. So
Right, that's fixed. And plus the two things that we're looking at that are not level funded are more like staff, but because
Right.
we're working with so many part-time staff and outside support rather than more full-time employees, it's like getting penalized for that.
Yeah.
So I don't see that as the same as changing expenses, and we don't have a lot of I would say if a telephone is pretty essential to the office.
Yeah.
And telephones for reaching everyone, that's mandatory. Emergency response,
They typically.
availability. Office supplies, but I don't know that we can.
I was gonna ask a question. How about computers? Because my Surface is not working tonight and I'm wondering if I might need a new one, but again, it's just curious if computer supplies are a central supply or if it's a individual department.
Yeah,
It's
it's
by
been
individual department.
I also want to point out that the actual change in non-salary here under the second one is at $256, which is,
I'd say we try to just go in with this budget
I think so.
because when I think of the expenses that, for example, CM&D has, that's the old name, that the DPW has. That's, like a new vehicle or piece of equipment. That's enormously different than the $256 that you just mentioned, Matt. So.
Yeah. No, I think we go on with this and we point out that those items that are not level are effectively salaries to subcontractors. And we get away with subcontracting so as we don't have to have a full-time person. And hopefully advisory can find $250 somewhere. I mean, I think we made 150 of it back just by charging the heritage.
I was gonna say, so it's really only 100, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm laughing because my father's a retired health inspector in California, and that's what they do there. They raise the fees.
Which we probably should do, but
So if Mark needs a new computer, how fancy do you want it?
yeah.
It's just something that functions.
Well, something that functions, yeah. So would that come, with a new computer come from our budget, or is that an administrative item?
No,
comes
it's been
from
from
our-
our budget in the past.
Under
So-
office supplies? All right, I'm sorry, Ellen, you said the new equipment was exclusively the Sharps disposal?
Well, that amount there is, yes.
Okay.
That's what the cost is.
It popped up as new equipment a couple years ago when that was like when we got it new and they just had
Right.
never changed the line item.
Right.
Yeah. and that
So
was-
it's more the Sharps management service at this point, fees,
Yeah.
which includes picking up and disposing of the Sharps and keeping the equipment running. Functioning, rather. Doesn't do much.
So I think we leave the two increase items as are. And then the question is, do we try to ask for something else somewhere for a new computer and hope that they grant it?
So I think the first step really that I envision them asking is, have we let the IT folks in town look at Mark's laptop? So I don't think we can answer that question until we go through that step, give them a chance to diagnose and see if it can be fixed. And I would also say, even if it goes, so if we get an answer, we could maybe add something to address that. If that issue isn't resolved before the budget has to be finalized, they don't like people or departments adjusting the budget for something that we think might happen. That's how budgets used to be done in the past. Now they prefer that you go with what you're certain of. And then if there are things that are encountered along the way, that then you go back to advisory and whomever else is needed to be involved and bring it up. So that would be the other way to approach it. We could confirm that. So one option that we could do, and this is due by December 31st, Ellen?
No, December 8th.
Oh, 8th. Yeah, I thought it was earlier. Okay, so one thing we could do is approve this now and revisit it on the 6th if we need to, and revise our vote.
I think that's
And then
fair.
we'd at least have it ready to go as something approved by the board and addressed.
Yeah, and then
Changes later.
if we know later we're going to need to purchase a computer, then we just add it next time. I think that sounds fine.
That sounds fine, but what does Mark do in the interim? Because I know how desperate
it
it is
just-
to not have your computer.
Just so you know, I unplugged it and it just came on. So I think all this discussion may have freaked out the computer to work so it doesn't have to go for analysis. But it hasn't been giving me trouble like this over the past month. So I think Ellen will have to definitely get it diagnosed. I would have to use my own computer at home, but I prefer to use the Surface. It's a nice computer. It just has these little glitches now and then in the past month or so where it just won't go on. So, but I'll see if they can diagnose it, see what's going on here.
Okay. And so do you know who to contact? Is it Klaus now who is
I
handling
believe
it?
so. I
Yeah.
always ask Ellen these questions. Ellen,
Yeah,
who do I
that's
go to? Thank you.
Yeah, it's close.
Okay,
Okay.
so next step is talk to Klaus, whoever that is.
He's probably the only Klaus, so it should be easier to find.
All right. So I guess with that, we will sort that out and revisit it next time if necessary. But otherwise, do I have a motion to approve this budget?
So
So
moved.
moved. Seconded.
Second.
Any other discussion on that? Hearing none, Matt Beaver's aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. So that covers chair's business. We can move on to 13 Coursebrook. So Mark, do you want to look? I mean, it sounds like basically they just want us to, it's understanding the process of removing their deed restriction, which we already discussed previously, right? And then they're sort of coming back.
Yes. Well, we actually discussed not needing to put up the fence at the last meeting, so that got resolved, and the board did say that as long as they post a sign. But now they're asking also for the deed recording to be withdrawn, and in doing so, there is an email that you receive from the owner of the house, one of the owners. And with that noted, the concern would be this. I mean, I don't see a harm having that deed recording because there's a barn there. And obviously presently I went through it and it's not being used presently, but it could be someday. And I think any new owner would need to know that, you know, they shouldn't be putting heavy livestock over the soil absorption area, leaching area for the septic. But that's up to the board. But, you know, it's the same concept of a garbage grinder. Ellen brought this up and it was a good point that, you know, we have that there for not just the present owner, but for any future owners, so they know not to put a garbage grinder in. So it's up to the board, but I don't see any harm in keeping the deed recording, but as I noted, I'll leave it up to the board.
I just
So
want to
the-
find, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Well-
go ahead, and then I'll comment.
Sure. Well, I think the concern here is that the deed recording, and I'm just trying to pull it up to find it, but the deed recording requires the fencing. And I think their argument is that we're saying that they have to have electric fencing in place. And so right now they don't have a fence, so they can't sell their house unless they build a fence. And so it feels a little bit different than saying you cannot install a garbage grinder, because this is saying you have to put up an electric fence when they don't have livestock to put up the fence. So I guess I get their concern. I guess the concern I have here is that, like, we don't make everyone else build a fence around their leaching field.
And that's a good point made as well. So it's a matter of seeing how we go about it if the board so wishes to allow them to remove the deed recording.
So I can also see the point in that at a minimum, I think, given what our discussion was at a prior meeting and where we came out, was that we're okay with them not having a fence, given that they're not planning livestock at this point. And so some sort of amendment that says that restriction does not apply unless and until there are animals who would be on the property, beyond a dog. So, and
Well,
however else
livestock.
we need to yeah, livestock. So
I think
if they had come to us before they finished putting it, or we're going to start putting in the septic system, and said that, oh, we're not going to be having livestock, and so we never got to the deed recording, then I would have been okay with that too. But now that we have it, and it is important information to have, they hadn't identified this change in how they were going to do things before. And I think to start reversing entirely,
I guess my
deed
problem is the deed
recordings, I'm
recording
not
says-
keen on setting that precedent.
But this deed recording says that they have to have a fence. And it must be
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. I could see something that changes it, that says, as I said, unless and until there's livestock, that portion of the deed recording does not need to be implemented.
Rebecca, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would just say that I think there was quite a bit of discussion about this property, and the compromise was to give a deed restriction, and I think it would be really it would weaken the board if we now lift that deed restriction. And the whole point of a deed restriction is for fair information transfer at the time of change of property ownership. There are multiple issues with this property, and I don't think we should be lifting the deed restriction. And I think that if the new owner comes to us and says, we're not going to have livestock, then okay, great. They can remove the fence.
But
I don't think-
the problem is there currently is no fence. And so are we going to require them to build a fence in order to sell their house? Because that's what this
Okay,
deed
but they told us
requires.
that they were going to be living in the house when we gave them the borders, the deed recording. So I guess we're going to have to tell them to put a fence up or put some plantings, because this is the second time now where we've basically been given incorrect information from the homeowner. So our ultimate responsibility as the Board of Health is to protect the septic system and the well, and to think about the big picture.
So I
and-
guess conversely, should we place a deed restriction on every house in town that says don't drive a truck over your septic system? Because that's
I don't know, Matt.
sort of
I
saying
don't
like
really
you
want to
shouldn't.
get into a debate. I'm just saying that we put the deed restriction on for a reason, and I think that there's a reason that it's there, and I think that it is very easy for information to get lost and impossible for enforcement to take place.
Right,
if we
but
don't do this.
I'm not comfortable charging them to install an electric fence, because that's what this is requiring at the moment, is it's telling them they have to install an electric fence.
And I would say that the information they provided at the time is that they were going to have livestock.
Yeah.
So this was wholly relevant at that point, but that has changed. That circumstance has changed. But the importance of protecting the leaching field has not changed. So that's where I'm thinking that there's sort of a middle ground here.
Especially if especially if they have a barn and they're selling it, it's going to be attractive to someone who might want to have
Yeah.
an animal that would go in a barn. So I think it gets really complicated. And so I think we need to be consistent. That's my opinion. Sorry.
That's fine. So I guess if we leave it as is, it requires them to build a fence. That doesn't feel fair.
No, I would
Because
not go for that.
We don't deed record like houses all over town for what you can and can't do with a septic system. We could remove it entirely and make it just like sort of every other septic system, which you shouldn't drive a truck over. Or we could find a compromise which says that if there will be livestock housed in the barn, there needs to be a fence around the field. That would be sort of the compromise.
And I would leave it to their lawyer to, we could say that, oops, hold on. I guess Mark.
Me,
you get
Daryl,
that?
I had to go around a different route to get to the meeting on my computer, but I finally did.
Oh, all right, great. Okay, so maybe there's some way to say, however they'd refer to either the specific language in this, but some way to reference that this portion of this deed recording with such and such a number on such and such a date is does not need to be implemented unless and until. I don't know if we want to write that up and provide that to them or ask their lawyers to address that in that manner, give some guidance, and then provide it back to the board to evaluate whether it matches what we were expecting to see. Which is what has happened with some other properties in town that had to deed recording something atypical that needed specialized language.
I like that idea. I think that without livestock, obviously this does not apply. But given that there is, my understanding that there is a barn that is ready for cows, horses, whatever large livestock that could enter the system. And so I think it does need to be conditional on the presence of large livestock. And I think one of the things we called out last time was specifying that is large, heavy animals and not a couple of chickens or ducks, if people do that. Just to make sure that it's clear that a couple of chickens will not require a fence.
Or just the turkeys that are going to walk there whether you like it or not.
I was going to say, or the turkeys. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with a modified deed recording that says that like if there will be large livestock, there needs to be a fence constructed.
Yeah, I'm fine with that also, because I do find that a barn for for a future owner could be an attraction, thinking, oh, I'll have the horse there.
Yeah, and it is a protection for them, the future owner. I agree.
And it sets a precedent, which isn't a bad one, that if we are building septic systems near barns and so forth, that this be considered for other projects as well.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then now we'll know, unless, I guess this could apply to any place that has a barn and with the septic system in a location that seems ripe for use by livestock, whether current or future, that maybe we would have some different language than this. Is this the first time we've encountered this that you know of?
That I'm aware of.
Yeah. And I just want to mention that yesterday I did talk with Nathan Berkowitz because he called about this, and I told him that it was on the agenda. And he said, oh, that's great. I will attend. I told him where to find the agenda, where to get the link. And he said, okay, but I see he's not here. So, but he was aware of it and he was invited.
So I guess did we come up with this existing language?
Yes.
So should we then modify this language to say that if there is livestock, there should be a fence constructed? Or should we ask their lawyer to do it?
Well, I think given
my sense
that
is they don't have a lawyer because they were Googling how to change a deed restriction.
Oh, okay. So then maybe I don't know if we want to try and craft it here together right now, or you want to authorize Ellen, Mark, and a board member to come up with some language that meets that, and possibly, unless they're in a hurry, bring it back to the next meeting.
I'd be
I
fine.
think that's appropriate.
Yeah, we didn't discuss this language in a meeting. I think we authorized Ellen and Mark and somebody to come up with it.
Yeah, if I remember right too, I think what happened was we were having discussions with the state to determine what the weight would be on livestock, as mentioned before, chickens versus cows, you know. So I think we were going through some of that review back when this was originally put on the agenda.
Mhm. And again, I see whatever we add, because deed recordings can be additive. If you've ever had the pleasure of looking through deed recordings for properties to evaluate. So we can just refine that requirement. We don't have to rewrite the whole thing. We can
Yeah.
amend essentially this. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably as simple as adding a sentence, you know, after this, in the middle of this first, or another comma splice, really, in this first sentence saying that if livestock is present, that electric fencing shall remain in place. So should we?
Oh yeah, for the future, but for now, we have to make some reference to that this one is being amended, like the provisions of this one, I think, for the flow. Otherwise, you'd have two different deed recordings up that are conflicting. One says fencing, the other one says no fencing, unless. So I think referring, and maybe we should just talk to town council about this to verify, but I think referring back to this one and say this specific one is being amended.
Yeah, that's reasonable, but I would probably defer to, I'd want a lawyer to tell me that.
Okay, so do we want to then have a motion that Ellen, Mark, and or X draft something and runs it by town council?
That sounds like a good motion. We just have to identify the X. It can be me. Or it could be someone
Really?
else.
Ooh. You just like the sound of being X.
Yeah, no, me and Elon Musk. No, I'm volunteering to take it on if nobody else wants to.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Ellen, were you the person who originally drafted this?
I honestly don't recall.
Okay.
I may have been, but I honestly don't remember.
Sure. Are you traditionally or kind of conventionally the person who would draft these?
As long as they're not complicated, I have.
Okay.
But,
Yeah, and Ellen and I work as a team on the complicated ones, and Daryl has been very helpful, and I think previous board members have as well.
And this seems like one of the less complicated ones.
Well, this
so
is
then
unique. This I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Julie. This
No.
one's
Go
unique in
ahead,
its
Mark.
own way. It was the first of any deed recording of this nature.
Yeah.
Normally they're boilerplates and they work out fine. We have boilerplates for garbage grinders and alternative technologies, but this one was unique, and we may have had a few others that were related to building applications, but outside of that, that's pretty much the boilerplates that we have are routine, mostly for garbage grinders and building applications for room count, as well as for alternative technologies.
Got it.
I'm all set.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so I would amend the motion to include Ellen, Mark, and or Matt Beavers to draft something that would then be reviewed by town council.
Okay.
So moved.
And I'll second
was that
it.
a motion? Sorry.
Yes, that was a suggested
Yes.
motion, so.
So it's been moved and I will second it. Any other discussion on this? Hearing none. Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye.
Okay. Other business. I think next we're on to other business. And so Rebecca, I saw today that you had sent forward some language on water testing from the state's model regulations.
Yes.
I'll speak for myself and say I thought there was a lot of good stuff in there. I would like a little more time to look through it all carefully since I just got it this afternoon. And so I would propose we discuss that at the next meeting. I mainly want to look through it and compare it to our existing regulations to make sure there's nothing that sort of weakens our existing regulations. But I do think there were important additions in there that would make sense for us.
So when I've reviewed the model well regulations, the most recent version, there are some things that we could consider adding, but some of it is just set up differently for Sherborn versus the state. So I see it more as being a matter of going through and seeing what we would pull out of there to add and what things we might pull out to say, that different technical approach to abandoning wells is one that we might want to apply just for consistency, or it's more stringent than what we already have. But we do have some things that are more stringent than the state. So I'm not inclined to say, let's just take those regulations and drop them in instead of ours.
These are model private well regulations, not state regulations. They're private well regulations recommended by the state for private water supplies.
I completely understand that.
I think we're just saying we don't want to just wholesale adopt them and replace what we have because there may be some cases in which we're more stringent.
Yes, and there's a tremendous amount of overlap. But again, sometimes it doesn't look that way because the layout is different of where different issues are addressed. So it does take quite a bit of back and forth to go through it.
It seemed like
the section that I thought that the paragraphs that pertain to rental units were relevant, and we don't have that in our regulations, and I was proposing that we add them. But then when I read through the others that are similar, they're very similar to what we have. They're hardly changing what we have. I just thought they were well written, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And it's fine if you want to go through them more carefully.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing is I just need a little, because I just got it this afternoon. I just need a little more time to go through it.
Yeah, and I just had another funeral where I had to go out of state for, so everything gets messed up apparently.
And I think the one other thing I'll note is that paragraph on rental units actually recommended required testing of every well in town on an annual basis. And so I think if that's something we were to adopt, there are a lot of logistical concerns there that we'd have to think about.
Well, we can recommend it without requiring it. We can't require it anyway. My understanding is these are private wells or private properties, so we can't require it anyway. We can recommend it as a board.
The language you sent required it, and so that's just the kind of detail I think we need to sort out.
Sure, whatever.
Because requiring it implies that we're going to follow up and verify, review and verify, and that is a very big task. And we have trouble enough not being supported for expanding staff to add a very large task.
The only one that I'm strongly attached to is the portion that refers to rental units, because those aren't ownership. Those are rentals. And I think those people deserve to have testing and reviews for their own safety.
Which,
so the other thing, sorry,
go ahead. Currently do. I think my concern about applying it only to rental units is that those costs are going to get passed on to the renters. And now we've created an imbalance in which some wells we require testing and some wells we don't. So I just think it requires some more thought on the details. That's all.
Yes, and as you mentioned, really any renter could take a water sample and analyze it as it is now. Nothing would stop a renter. They might want to know before they get in. That is a different matter. The other thing is, I'm not sure I want the responsibility now because there are so many things going on, and there have been a lot of things going on for quite a while, to add the task of trying to look at the details of updating our private well regulations right now. So I said, I've read through them in the past. There are a few finer points, but all the major points are covered. I
If you
like
look
the
at
idea
this,
of adding radon to the testing. That's a good one that we don't have at the moment. We've recommended it and what have you, but it's just a big job. So for me, my preference would be to focus on whether or not we do something regarding rental units. We don't have a lot of rental units in town.
right, and if you read it, I mean, it doesn't say that the town has to monitor it. It just says the owner needs to provide it for the renter if they ask for it. And
I
that
understand that, but there's,
so it doesn't give the town more work. It doesn't give us more work. It gives them
So
a responsibility for the
the
tenant.
language you sent required testing of every well in town and submittal to the Board of Health. So maybe we could carve out the rental unit only portion and do that, but it's not the language that you sent. So we have to like have the details just matter here, which is why I think we talked about sort of trying to refine it and talk about it next time.
yes.
I heard, yeah, I got that message. Thank you.
Okay, and then I did not see anything sent with further detail on bedrock disruption. Did you have something else on that you wanted to share, Rebecca?
Yeah, I have a lot of information, but I can just do it all at the next meeting if you prefer, because a lot of this, I mean, this was much more specific, and I know that a lot of the bedrock disruption is much more controversial. People have different opinions. There's going to be discussion because there has been before. The main point, which I think we need to discuss, and I may be in the minority again, but that is that I did talk to two experts in the world of hydrology and toxicology, and it's important if we use a threshold to be able to prove that below that threshold it's safe, and I don't think we can do that. So I think that we in our new regulations have a threshold after which notification is required, and that I think sets the town up for liability because it might not be a very large amount of lead containing rock to contaminate a well, and so it may end up being more onerous in the end if there is a threshold. And I feel pretty strongly about that we should, if we're going to have a notification system, we should just have notification for all bedrock disruption, and not, I think the threshold is creating liability for the town.
All right, so
I guess the question there, does that mean if I plant a tree in my yard, I have to go to the Board of Health first?
I don't think that if planting a tree involves bedrock disruption. I think maybe we could have a different definition of bedrock disruption, but I don't think
if your threshold is 0, digging a hole could disrupt more than 0.
Pulverizing rock is different than digging a hole. You probably wouldn't
call it pulverizing. We call it disrupting bedrock. You crack a piece of bedrock off, that's disrupting. So I'd like to just go back on process to the way that we've done this before. And there are 2 levels on process on this. One is that as we did last year, or other board members did last year, is there were sections that the board was interested in considering making revisions to. people came up with proposed language of what that would look like. And then once we had the language in front of us, then we discussed the issues and whether we liked the language and what that might result in, or whether there were adjustments to be made, or whether we didn't like it at all. So that's what you need to propose. The other thing I'd say that's a little tricky on process is we had this discussion about bedrock disruption not that long ago. I'm not saying that we should never revisit it, but we've had these discussions at the board quite often on that.
How about if I just come up with some wording for you to review no longer than 1 week before the next meeting?
That'd be
No
great.
less than 1 week.
No
before the
less
meeting.
than 1 week, sorry.
That'd be great.
Perfect.
Okay.
That was the goal. Thank you.
All right. So we'll put this on the agenda again for the next meeting, and we'll look forward to reviewing the language.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item is minutes for approval from the 18th, which is now almost a month out. So that I think really needs to get addressed. And then the last meeting from 2 weeks ago.
I had minor edits that I submitted to Ellen. Nothing that significantly altered anything.
Yeah, I think I had some minor edits on the 18th and I wasn't there for the first.
And I only had minor edits.
I was going to make 2 minor edits, but I didn't get them into you on time because I had to travel for a memorial. So I guess I can't do that unless you allow me to make those sometime in the next
Was
24
that,
hours.
is that for the 18th or the 1st?
The 18th. No, I don't have anything really for the 1st, but I just had 2 for the 18th. But I recognize that it's taken a long time. You know, it's been a while since that meeting. So your decision.
I think we should vote on to approve them just because it's been a month.
Yes,
That was
I think.
there was interest. So, Julie, did you have any edits? I can't recall.
For the first, I sent them to Ellen, but they were very minor.
All right. So, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the October 18th meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Matt Beavers, aye.
I'm going to abstain because I was not present at that meeting.
Diana Hook, aye.
I'm going to abstain because I would like to make a couple edits.
Abstaining won't give you that opportunity, depending on how the vote goes.
I understand.
Okay. Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the November 1st meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, Matt Beavers, I'll abstain because I wasn't there.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca, do you want to
Rebecca,
vote?
Where do we vote? What are we voting on?
The November 1st minutes.
Yeah, Rebecca Honeywell, I just making sure.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. And then I think our last item for tonight is to review the agenda for the next meeting. We've
I don't think you
Oh,
did
did I
Nirvana.
miss something? Oh, we never did the tea house. We talked about
Yeah.
adding it, but never voted.
Right.
All right, here it is. It's for the Turkey Festival. Did Tom have any concerns?
No, he actually recommended approval. He said he's familiar with them. He's inspected them many times.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the temporary food establishment permit for the Nirvana Tea House and Cafe?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
I always forget, like I remember to vote to add them, but then I forget we also have to talk about them. Sorry about that. All right, have I missed anything else?
Agenda items.
I think agenda
I
items is
think-
the last thing.
I think something else, and maybe Ellen sending out a reminder for the ZBA hearing on the 14th of December. Perhaps we want to do the same arrangement that we did for the last ZBA meeting. We didn't have a quorum at that meeting, so there was no need to call the meeting to order, but maybe to post it again as a board meeting in case there is any deliberation that
Are
quorum.
you going to, would you be willing to either make some comments on that meeting? I ended up having a staff meeting, so I wasn't able to attend, and I'd be really interested in your thoughts or observations. And I was
On the
wondering,
last one? Well, that's
Yeah.
not on the agenda, so I could do that next meeting.
okay, I mean, I'd be interested. I don't know whether anyone else on the board is interested. I'm also interested to know if you had finally sent a letter to the homeowner at 39 Wildwood, and if I could just read the letter that you sent.
Oh, yes, we did. We can
Yes, the
distribute,
letter was sent to them.
yeah, a while back. We can distribute that to the board if it hasn't been.
Yeah, I would just be interested in seeing it if you don't mind. Thanks.
And Rebecca, the
Yeah.
for the ZBA hearing, for
Yeah.
when Daryl was making comments, I listened to that and it was very helpful to hear. So it might be a good starting point to, you don't
Oh,
have
yeah,
to necessarily
definitely.
listen to the whole thing, but
Yeah, so busy. Anyway, too bad it's not on the agenda. It's okay. Thanks.
All right, so then for next time agenda items, where are we? Ellen, do we have anything scheduled for next week?
Yeah, yes, there is one variance hearing. That's all that's scheduled right now, other than, the Greenwood Homes 40B, the
Mhm.
budget,
Mhm.
and anything else.
Probably a
and-
well update again.
What was it?
The well update again, if we have any update on
Oh,
the
okay,
on the Laurel Farm. And then Rebecca's proposed regulatory updates.
Yeah.
Anything else anyone has? Okay, well, I mean, as
Yeah.
always, we have up till 48 hours ahead of time if things come up.
Yep.
All right. This might be a record, at least during my time on the board.
Yeah, this is one of the records, yeah.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Seconded.
Great, Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, I.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right, see you all in a couple weeks.
Pleasure, everyone.
care.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving.
That's right.